I love to work with simple shapes in my card designs, and in today's video, I'm focusing on circles, or what I like to call lots of dots. Let's start simple with one big dot. I like to use my Essentials by Ellen Essential Shapes dies to create narrow, negative frames in my designs, and I do this quite a bit. These dies make it easy because they have double edges, so they cut that narrow frame automatically. But what if you want the look without having those special dies? You can use any nesting dies you have. Let me show you how. I've got a whole set of regular circle dies here, and I'm choosing only one at this point. I center it in my square panel and run it through my die cutting machine. That gives me the square outline and a circle die cut which would fit right in. Now I'm choosing another circle, and this one's actually from a completely different set that has stitching around the edge. I put that one on my circle die cut, and it doesn't matter if it's centered or not. I run it through my die cutting machine, and here's the same look of that negative frame. This one has a wider frame, and you can choose a different width of frame by choosing circles that are closer or further away in size from each other. Now the reason I wanted the stitching on my inner circle is so that I can add some dots. I'm using Copic markers in 5 colors, and I started with my lightest color, a pale yellow. I put a dot in each stitched area, and that stitching helps me know where to place the dots. I started off counting so I would have the colors evenly spaced, but then I realized I hadn't counted how many stitches there were in total, so I didn't know if they would actually be a multiple of 5, so I started just doing it a bit more randomly. I worked my way through all my colors, and then I actually changed my mind about one. The 2 yellows were too close together, so I grabbed a darker one and went over every other yellow dot. These dots are small, and I wanted more color on my card, so I decided to add dots to the outer circle frame as well. This time, of course, I didn't have any stitching to help me with spacing, so I opened all 5 markers and I worked in order all the way around. I kept the markers in order next to me, so I didn't really have to think about what came next, and it went pretty quickly. To finish this card, I popped up the inner circle and I added a waffle flower high die cut that had been inked with blackjack ink. I added 3 little rainbow sparkle jewels from Crafty Meraki on the dot of the eye. Next, I've got the layered dot set of 2 stencils from a Colorful Life Designs. This one has larger dots that are spaced out, and I chose Skylight, Shea Butter, Sauna, Sparkling Berry, and Sangria ink, and I blended them through the stencil on an angle so I'd get some blended colors as well. I worked my way from top left to bottom right and then back up again to get more ink down in more vibrant colors. Then I grabbed the second layer stencil. This one has little groupings of 4 small dots that fit in between the big dots. I used the same colors in the same order, but I started at the bottom right this time so that there's a mix of colors. I'm working on a sticky mat which holds the cardstock and the stencil in place, and that makes them very easy to work with. When I was finished, I bent the sticky mat back to release the cardstock. This ensures that my panel stays nice and flat. To finish this card, I trimmed the panel down to a square and popped up a piece of layered cake using an MFT stamps die that I had blended the same ink colors onto. I added some more of those rainbow sparkle gems onto one of the layers for some glam. Okay, so that's using both layers together as they were intended, but what happens if we use them one at a time? This one has dots that are big enough to blend individually, so I used foam daubers to randomly place the colors around the panel again, working my way through all 5 colors. You can use the panel just like this, or you can use the stencil again as its own second layer. This time I'm going to shift the stencil so that the next layer of dots will fit perfectly in between the ones I've already blended. To get some variety in colors without actually having to clean the stencil, I turned it before I shifted it, and hopefully I won't have too many of the same color all lined up. This looks pretty good, so I removed the stencil and cleaned it. But then I thought, wait, I can do this 2 more times by overlapping the dots a bit. I took a minute to be sure that all the circles were overlapping by the same amount, and then blended my colors through another time. You get a really neat look at this point with some white areas, and you could stop here, but I figured I better go all the way to show you all the options. Again, I turned the stencil so I wouldn't have to clean it, made sure it was lined up properly, and then I blended my 5 inks through for the final time. To finish this card, I used one of my Essential Circles die, and I cut a circle from the middle of the card. I popped up an Ellen Hutson sentiment, and yep, there's those rainbow sparkles again. These flash pink and yellow and then green and blue depending on the light, and they're a great match for my color palette. Then I tried just the second stencil, the one with the groups of smaller dots. This time I went horizontal with my blending, but I still made sure I would get some color blends by not sticking with one color per row. Once I finished that, I turned the stencil again so I wouldn't have to clean it, and this time I went vertical with my blending. I only did 2 layers, but you could take it to 3 or 4 like I did with the previous one. I just loved this pattern so much that I didn't want to go any further. To finish this card, I cut out a sentiment from the Sizzix Bold Text 1 set, and I backed the holes with some cardstock I had blended blackjack ink onto. And of course, some rainbow sparkle, this time 3 in a row on each corner. For my next card, I used up some leftovers from a card I made last month. A die like this round-the-block mini slim cover plate is great on its own, but it's also fabulous for cutting multiple circles all at once. And when you use the circles, you're not restricted to the mini slim size either. I'm going to make a square card, so I counted out 16 dots. The die cut's 15, but I had a couple of sets of leftovers in my pocket, so I had what I needed. I did some quick math and I colored 3 dots with 4 colors and then 4 dots with the 5th color, just pressing them into my ink pads. Today's video is a collaboration with my friend Ishani, who's a super talented card maker. She always has really fresh and inspiring ideas, so when you're finished here, I'll give you a link to her video so you can get double the dots and double the inspiration. These inks fade back a bit as they dry, as you can see right here. I thought they looked a little boring, so I grabbed a geometric 3D embossing folder and I placed them all in to add a little texture. And then to emphasize that texture, I used sponge daubers to lightly blend ink over that texture. Again, the color dried back, so it ended up with a really subtle tone-on-tone look. I wasn't really sure what to do for a sentiment, but I knew I wanted it to be dots. So I grabbed some more of my leftovers and I put them into a partial die cut of the background. Then I used the connected alphabet stamp set from MFT and I put one of the birthday letters on each one. Since I had 9 white dots, I put a little happy word on the 9th one to finish off the sentiment. I stamped these simple letters with blackjack ink and then arranged them as kind of a layered up circle grid. To finish this card, I just added a small gem on each letter and 5 of the tiniest sized gems on the happy. This circle grid got me thinking that you don't always have to use full circles. I used a Geometric Builder's square die from Simon Says Stamp and I cut 10 of them before blending 2 colors of ink onto each square. You don't need to use a square die, you could just cut squares with your trimmer. I did a little more math. 10 squares, 2 colors on each square, 5 colors of ink, means 2 each of 5 combinations. The combinations with the 2 yellows and the 2 pinks and purples were more like gradients, but the blue-yellow, yellow-pink, and purple-blue gave gorgeous blends. Then I grabbed the circle die that cuts 2 half circles and I cut each square. This gave me a pile of half circle shapes with beautiful blends on them, all ready to build my background. I did a basic 3x3 grid, some with 2 half circles facing away from each other and some facing each other to create full circles. I played around until I was happy with the color mix, and of course I had those 2 extra pieces in case I needed a substitution. To finish this one, I embossed a small sentiment in white on a strip of cardstock that had been inked with blackjack ink. And there's my final 4 rainbow sparkle gems of the video. I feel like I could just go on and on. There are so many ways to use circles in your card designs. Here's a link to Ishani's channel. She's got even more to share with you. Thanks so much for watching. See you next time.